Welcome back to Focus Miss Gaming, and today we're going to look at the final of the trio for your Cantonian starters, and that is going to be Blastoise. So Blastoise is a really good Pokemon in draft, just to get that out of the way, but we're going to talk about why it is actually good. So to start with, its stats, it's got pretty okay HP, C+, and then its attacks and defense and special attack are all in that kind of B range. They're all in that mid to high 80s. So if we pull this up here, defense is again B+, it's about 100. Its attack stats are going to be much lower, both in the mid 80s. Special defense is a little bit higher. And then you have subpar speed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing for this kind of mon, because low speed in certain mons is actually kind of nice. And then its mega form, which we'll talk about, is it dials all its attacks and special attack and defenses. It dials them all up, puts them all into the A to the S range. Special attack gets a little bit more of a boost, I would say, due to that ability. But first, the typing. With being just a pure water type, and you might hear the term bulky water being thrown around in draft, and the reason that is because it's only electric and grass types you're really weak to, which narrows down the field and allows you to pick and choose other Pokemon a part of your roster that can kind of patch those holes really easily. It's pretty digestible for most drafters to say it's like, oh, I just need maybe 1 or 2 mons to cover those and make a pretty solid defensive core. And then your resists are going to be fire, ice, steel, and water. So while again you're not weak to a lot, you also don't resist a whole lot. A lot of water types are going to be more on the more bulky side. Steel types too are going to tend to be more defensive. So your only real offensive types, quote unquote, are going to be your fire and ice types, which is fine. And then you don't get any immunities, nothing special for water. So going to the abilities for Blastoise. Blastoise gets Torrent, so it's just like the other ones we've talked about in Blaze or Overgrow, where it boosts up those water attacks when you're at a third HP or less by 1.5, which is really good. Unfortunately, it gets Rain Dish as well, which Rain Dish, it's also a D tier kind of thing. It's going to be niche if you run into an opposing, let's say, rain team that uses Politoed or Pelipper. You might be able to steal some HP, which is probably one of the biggest things for Blastoise. What it's lacking is sustainability. So if you do see yourself going against a rain team and you have Blastoise, it's a great little add if you're not going to be planning to be on that low end of the spectrum of HP and firing off your stab moves. And then the special, not special, but the Mega version gets Mega Launcher, which is really nice. So all the, if we go over here, it doesn't tell us, but Mega Launcher basically turns all of your pulse moves times 1.5, which is really nice because Blastoise actually gets a fair amount of pulse moves. And from that being Aura Sphere, Dark Pulse, Terrain Pulse, and Water Pulse as well. I don't think it gets any more. There's not a whole lot of pulse moves, but it's pretty useful. So, with that, let's talk about the general move pool of, we'll go back here, Blastoise. So, its important moves, unlike Charizard and Venusaur, Blastoise gets a whole suite of moves. I've put most of the important ones on the screen, so if you want to pause, look at those. You can also go through Pokemon Showdown, other websites, and look at them. It's got a lot. But from its stab options, you have physical and special moves that are really useful, from Surf, Scald if you want to fish for burns, Hydro Pump if you want max damage, Flip Turn's your pivot move, Liquidation. I didn't include Waterfall because Liquidation's just slightly better, but they're both physical, 100% accurate moves. If you want to fish for flinches, go for it. Water Spout, which is the 150 base power, it's the water version of Eruption. Deals a lot of damage if you have max HP, less if you don't. Wave Crash, which is your recoil move, it's your water type double edge. You have Aqua Jet, so you also get priority. Chilling Water, which is the move that basically inflicts the Growl effect, the -1 physical attack, even though it's a little bit weaker. And then Water Pulse, only really for the Mega. You can run that if you want the launcher boost, but you can also just run Hydro Pump if you just want pure damage, because Hydro Pump does still do a bit more damage than Water Pulse, but you can run Water Pulse over something like Surf. As for coverage, it's got a lot again. You got Body Press, which is going to be part of one of the sets we'll talk about, Dark Pulse, Earthquake, Aura Sphere, Crunch, Blizzard, Dragon Pulse, Focus Blast, woohoo, Focus Blast, Ice Spinner to get rid of terrain, Ice Beam to hit the special stuff, Iron Tail, if you really just hate Fairy-mons, Outrage, which I don't think you'll ever use, but who knows, Rock Slide, Signal Beam, Zen Headbutt, Flash Cannon, even get Weather Balls so you can fit onto weather teams, Terrain Pulse, mostly for the Mega. You can use this absolutely on the regular version, but the Mega version really benefits, and you also get Terra Blast as well, so if you pick a Terra type, you can basically get any coverage move you want and mix and match it. And then the meat and potatoes of why Blastoise is so sought after is it's got so much utility, so much it can do. This is, like, we'll talk about later about, like, mons that have really good potential. Blastoise in draft is one of those that reaches most of its potential almost always whenever it's drafted, because it's got just enough bulk where it's always going to be able to get off a move or two within a match. Whether that be in Rapid Spin to clear hazards, really effective. Icy Wind and Bulldoze are your speed control. Since we don't have access to Paralysis, we can still affect the speed of opposing mons and pivot out. We have Endure, if you want to use that to survive something. Yawn, spelled that wrong, oof. Yawn, Toxic, those are your status effects. You have Substitute, you have Rest, so you do have Rest Sleep Talk if you want that kind of recovery. It's not the most reliable though, and if your opponent sees it, it's probably going to get abused to some ability. And it takes half of your move slots to run, so you can do it. It's just with a word of warning. Shell Smash is really great for a boosting move. Be wary though, usually it's banned on Mega Blastoise within draft leagues, so if you take Mega Blastoise and you have the idea, like, oh, I'm going to boost up and it's just going to be unwallable. No. It's usually banned because of that. Seismic Toss is really good on more passive sets. Roar is great for phasing so you don't get set up on. Refresh purges status effects on you, so if you get toxic or you get burned, it gets rid of it. Reflect has half the screens, which is kind of nice. Power Up Punch, which is mostly going to be seen on like AV sets, just to boost up the attack if you're wanting to fire off, let's say, Aqua Jet or Wave Crash. Iron Defense, really good to boost up your defense. Haze, if you just don't want anybody setting up on you, if they're too fast and they put up a sub, you can haze them out and you can roar. Those are your kind of two options. Dragon Tail also works really good on AV sets, can still phase people out. Block, if you don't want people to leave, you can keep them there. I include Facade here as well, so if you want to go with a Shell Smash variant and you get burned for some reason, it's an option. Curse, it's your defensive and offensive boost. Blastoise doesn't really care about speed too much, except with the exception of Shell Smash sets, so you can use this as a pretty good bunkered down kind of move. Brick Break to get rid of screens, you get Counter, you get Mirror Coat so you can reflect stuff back, and you also even get Fake Out in Nat decks, which is really nice if you want to break Sturdy on Donphan, for example, and stun them for a turn, and then hit them with Surf and kill them. It's really good. So, with all those options out there in the world, what does Blastoise actually want to run? So, you'll see, I've had it up a little bit already, but the Pivot Control Blastoise, this is where it leans mostly into that support role. You're going to run Heavy Duty Boots here. It's a great item. I'll scroll down here so we can talk about team fits and items. I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, great item. So Blastoise's main draw, the reason why you want to draft this mon is roll compression. So what is roll compression? Roll compression is a mon that can do a lot of different things to at least decent effect. Blastoise here, it can act as your hazard remover. It can act as a slow or medium speed pivot. It can threaten a lot of weaker foes that on the defensive side with its just myriad of coverage options. It has a built-in setup move in Shell Smash, and it has setup in Iron Defense Body Press. So it has two different really good setup builds that you can run. In the Mega version, if you decide to go that route and don't take regular Blastoise, most of those sets also still apply, except now you're a very, very strong special attacker on top of it. That can boost your speed with Rapid Spin. You can boost your defense with Iron Defense if you wish. You can still spread status. You can still pivot. And it just really brings it together most teams. A lot of teams, they might say, let's say you took Charizard and Venusaur from the other episodes. And you're like, well, how does Blastoise work with them? Well, it's the one mon between them that can pivot. It has the most move options, has the most kinds of sets that it can run that do very different things. Even though Charizard has a lot of sets, let's say, they all kind of do the same thing, right? You're either doing support defog or you're trying to sweep. And you're trying to sweep in a different kind of way, right? Whether it's Swords Dance or Dragon Dance, etc. Blastoise, it likes to do a lot of different things, and it can, so this is one of those toolbox mons that you bring probably never the same set each week, or you rarely run exactly the same set, depending on what you're trying to evolve, what you're trying to survive, what you're trying to clear in front of, and that's how you game plan. And that leads to also a lot of different items that you can use. Being a water type too, having good defenses, not being weak to rocks, really nice. But we can still run heavy duty boots. Most mons want to run this item in one kind of set or another, and that's because even though we're not weak to rocks, we can still take spikes damage. We can still get worn down because we don't have any recovery outside of rest, and you can still get poisoned through toxic spikes. So it's still really nice to have and guarantee that you're going to be fresh when you come into the battlefield and then spin away all those hazards. Leftovers is the other most popular option to take because, with, again, unreliable recovery being kind of the main sticking point against Blastoise, having a little bit of that really does help. Rocky Helmet helps deter just people free pivoting off of you, hitting U-turn, any physical attackers. Covert Cloak helps stop one particular mon, and a few others, but one particular mon we'll talk about in a little bit later that really helps turn the tide against it. Healing Berries can be really nice, whether it's Ipapa or Citrus Berry. It's a really good Assault Vest user as well, so if you want to be just completely specially defensive and say take on something like a Darkrai, you can kind of figure that out and manage it. Life Orb as well. You can go on the opposite end of the spectrum with Life Orb, Expert Belt, and you can fire off a Shell Smash set, and you're gonna be like, I'm just gonna shred everything in front of me, and hopefully it's not faster, because even with +2 speed, 78 base speed isn't blazing. It's okay, but it's not crazy. And then you also have protective pads, so if you're going to be doing something that's physically offensive, you can protect yourself from mons that are like Ferrothorn, for example, or even Garchomp with Rough Skin, so you're not taking adverse hits, you're not getting maybe staticked by a Zapdos or Flame-Bodied. Just a really nice item to keep in mind. Red card too, Blastoise is bulky, it can come into the field, it can possibly phase out a opposing mon that has a setup on you. It's kind of a last-ditch effort, but again, without having a lot of weaknesses, it's a pretty safe bet for a red card mon. And then White Herb. White Herb is going to be primarily for your Shell Smash sets, so you don't die to a priority move or a mon that is faster because of your lower defenses. That's mainly why you're going to run it. But those are the items, and that's your team fit. So going back over to what the actual builds are. So Pivot Control, you're running Rapid Spin, Flip Turn, Roar, Toxic. It's a pretty simple game plan, right? You're going to clear hazards, you're going to threaten other mons with your status, and if they're faster than you and set up with a substitute, you roar them out. And once your job's done, you Flip Turn and leave. And then you rinse and repeat. And again, the only problem here is, and we'll talk about teammates, is you do get worn down to chip. That's why you're wearing boots, so you don't take the Stealth Rock or Spikes damage, or get poisoned by T-Spikes. But again, if they're faster than you and you turn out on you, that's gonna accumulate over the course of the match. So you're gonna have to have an answer to those particular threats with your other teammates, or you're going to have ways to heal up for Blastoise via Wish Passing, which is very possible. So, Pivot Control, it's one of my favorite ones. You can make it max defensive, you can make it max specially defensive, you can toy around with the speed EVs to make sure that you're slower or faster than a particular mon, to leave that instance of battle when you want, and kind of dictate the terms of how Blastoise kind of rolls with the tide and ebbs and flows. So, on the other end of the spectrum, Shell Smash. It's your sweeper set. So, you run Shell Smash, you run Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, Terra Blast. Most common Terra type for this would be about Terra Electric. So, you're going to run... You can run plus special attack, but you might have to run plus speed depending on what your matchup is. Be sure to look at what Scarfers your opponent has, and do you outspeed them or not? Because if you don't and they can KO you back, might not be worth running the set. So it's one of those that you should always game plan for if you're against a Blastoise, like have an answer to it. But if you recognize, and this kind of comes with skill level, is if you recognize that you do have answers, you might be able to get away with not prepping something, but it's one of those things too where an opponent also might see that you have Blastoise, and if you've been running a lot of Shell Smash, they might bring Mirror Herb, and you might get Reverse Swept. That very much has happened. It's a really good item against Blastoise if they really like to use it offensively. The other sets, IDBP, or Iron Defense Body Press. This set I really like. It's terrible against one archetype, and that's Ghost Pokemon in particular, so that's why you have Flip Turn to get out of there. But Body Press, Iron Defense, max special defense, so if they do try to go attack you on the other side that you're not boosting, you're not completely hosed. And then Refresh is to purge off Toxic, get rid of burns, paralysis, whatever it may be. And Lefties is your incremental health regeneration. As you boost up your defense, you'll be taking hopefully less from incremental hits from your opponents, and you'll be able to eventually bulldoze through the enemy team, barring they don't have any ghost types, hopefully. Or if they don't have any like really strong special attackers that can break through Blastoise. But Iron Defense Body Press is a very fun set, and one I do recommend running. One last note on that. If you don't want to run Refresh, you can run Lumberry or Chestoberry and Rest instead if you want just that full heal. So you might do like click Iron Defense twice in a row. Might be kind of low on health, but if you're faster than the opponent, you can then click Rest, have your Chestoberry pop, and then you're good to go. But that does still mean you are weak to future burn status, procs, flame body statics, etc. So just something to keep in mind. You have the Special Wall. This is going to be your Assault Vest Mon, which you have to run all attacking moves. You got Dragon Tail, you got Flip Turn, Chilling Water, Seismic Toss. You're not here to do raw damage, you're here to slow down your opponent, phase them out, absorb hits for the rest of your team. Seismic Toss is so they don't throw up substitutes in front of your face. Chilling Water is to wear physical attackers down, because it's going to lower that by 1. So unless they have Swords Dance, then you can just click Dragon Tail. If they're a Fairy type, clicking Swords Dance, which I don't know any that come off the top of my head that aren't Terra. So it's pretty good though. And then you have your Physical Breaker. So if you want to go lean into that offensive physicality of Blastoise, this is the Curse set. There's other variants out there, but we got Wave Crash, Earthquake, Gyro Ball, and we're going to be lowering our speed, so Gyro Ball is going to get stronger. And this is one type that usually Blastoise struggles with is Fairy types, and having that steel coverage is really nice. Again, we're not going to care about our speed. It's one, too, where since you are bulky enough, you probably don't need Trick Room support either. You can probably just run this and be like, hey, if I can take care of their special attackers and I can set up and get curses off, my defense is going to go up, and I'm going to be able to survive a lot of attacks and possibly close out the game, depending on how things shake out. So that's really nice. And then again, if you don't need Earthquake, you can always put on Flip Turn, so if you get into a situation you need to scout stuff out, you can pivot out and just kind of scout your opponent and figure out when and how might be a good opportunity to set up on a certain mon, or you might have to clear someone. Talking about, okay, so let's go to Megas, and then we'll talk about the partners and what other mons might give Blastoise the fits. So the first Mega set, so bulky special attacker, rapid spin to increase your speed, Aura Sphere, Dark Pulse, Water Pulse, using all pulse moves. Woohoo! This is probably the most vanilla version of Blastoise. Not too much to say, except you're here for big damage, you'll clear some hazards. You might trade out Dark Pulse or Aura Sphere for Flip Turn to give yourself some pivoting access, but overall, very vanilla, and you get the idea. And then number 2, this is the one I like to pair up on terrain teams, particularly with like Tapu Koko or Indeedee. So you got Flip Turn, Terrain Pulse, Rapid Spin, Hydro Pump. So you're looking for maximal damage output. You want to get a Rapid Spin off to really just blow past all the other speed options that you might have on the opposing side. And Terrain Pulse is going to do a lot of damage. If you're curious, plug it into a calc with Terrain Up and look at how many things it'll shred. It also gives you just really good, unique coverage, whether it's going to be Psychic, Fairy, Grass, or Electric, depending on whatever terrain is present. Also, terrain teams are pretty prevalent on opponents. People love to draft Tapu Koko. They'll draft Tapu Fini, which is a little bit harder to break through for Blastoise, not the greatest matchup, but you'll also see Indeedee and Tapu Lele as well, and those are really nice to switch in Blastoise in and kind of turn the tables. So that's what we got here, and those are some pretty fun sets. And so now we gotta ask the question, how can we leverage these to put Blastoise in the best position possible? Oh, and then Arteric options that are going to be optimal for Blastoise. Electric is going to be your best option for Shell Smash generally. It gives you Bolt Beam coverage. Stab, that's going to be for any of your just general breaker sets. Steel, Fairy, Poison, Ground are going to be quite nice. If you really want... where is it? You could go Terra Fighting on the Iron Defense Body Press set. I would also argue Terra Fire might be worth it as well if you want to avoid burns. Just a thought. That way you might not have to include Refresh, and you can insert other move there that you might like for coverage or some added utility. You might want to just have Rapid Spin, for instance. So, moving on. Common allies, enemies, and prey in the draft. So now that we've actually got an idea of what Blastoise does, who's it actually going to go with? First one, Scizor. So this one's really easy to comprehend. Blastoise checks fire types. Scizor has excellent typing in Bug Steel, checks everything else. Also, it frees up Scizor from having to do defog shenanigans and lets it run more versatile offensive sets. So if it wants to run Band, it can get away with that. If it wants to run Swords Dance, if it wants to run Roost and Substitute, it can do that. This also works for Mega Scizor as well. This is going to be a very balanced approach of how you want to build your roster up and have Pokemon support each other without having glaring weaknesses and holes. So, highly advocate for Scizor. It's a great mon to draft, especially with a bulky water type that can do a lot and kind of take the pressure off. Another one, Tapu Koko. We talked about it a little bit earlier. As a terrain abuser and just being a fast electric type as well, you guys can have the slow and fast pivot kind of dynamic within your team. Mega Blastoise or even regular Blastoise can use Terrain Pulse and gain access to electric coverage, which can be a nice surprise against certain opponents. And Blastoise helps mitigate the steals and ground types that are going to blunt off Koko's ability to function. So even if it can't Volt Switch, it can still U-turn, and if it goes into a, let's say a ground type for instance, it can't Volt Switch on, you can throw in Blastoise, you immediately have a threat, which is super nice. So again, another duo kind of complementary thing, even though if the type doesn't work out, like it's still neutral to grass, for instance, but there's other mons you can draft for that. You can get a fire type, right? So, another one, Jirachi. Jirachi is a rocker and wish passer. So, talking more about the lack of sustainability and staying power of Blastoise. Passing wish off the Blastoise and also keeping rocks up on your opponent's side is a big deal, where Blastoise can again work on clearing hazards that the opponent may want to trade with you, keep them healthy, whether you want it to be a offensively leaning set or just that utilities spread toxics. You can really both muddy up the field. You can spread toxic, Jirachi can spread toxic as well, or do Thunder Wave. There's a lot you can do here. So it's just a really nice kind of complement. Whereas also Blastoise can take the ground type attacks and the fire type attacks that Jirachi doesn't. Another one, Goodra. I include both Goodras because they effectively do about the same thing. They absorb grass moves. They have Sap Sipper, which is really helpful. And it's not on a Grassmon too, so you have that added variety of dragon typing or dragon steel typing. So Blastoise again can take over the ground coverage on the opponent's team, while Goodra can kind of handle everything else and be, say, like a chunky AV attacker or spread its own status. Or both of these, oddly enough, kind of fit on rain teams because you have Rain Dish and you also have Hydration with Goodra. So you can purge off statuses, you can recover. It's kind of a nice little synergy if you want to run like Manual Rain, just if you have a bunch of abilities that might line up. So if you have like, say, a Swift Swimmer randomly on your team, like, Overquill. Overquill might be something you would draft with these guys. It might be a decent option to consider. Another one, Breloom. So Breloom is the one that's going to absorb those electric attacks, being resistant to them. It ignores Toxic because it's a Toxic Orbmon, so getting heals off of that instead. But most importantly, it's going to help punch through opposing steel types that might cause Blastoise issue if you don't want to bring Body Press Iron Defense. And Spore. Spore allows you to swap in Blastoise, get off a Shell Smash, and possibly go for the win. So anytime you have that kind of opportunity and you know they're not going to rock like safety goggles, it's usually worth it to at least try it. And then also Breloom gets a decent priority and stuff too. So it's a very nice compliment. Last one. I think this is the last partner I included. Nope, one more. Komala. So Komala, it's immune to status thanks to Comatose. It kind of takes over the budget spinner role from Blastoise, so Blastoise is kind of freed up to do other things if it wishes to do, and it can also pivot around as well. Also, if you want to have just Kamala's got better special defense, it can rock with AV, and Blastoise can be your physically defensive mon for a particular matchup. So that's kind of nice, where they complement each other on the defensive spectrum, while also being able to trade off the rapid spin kind of role. And also, Komala can also absorb potential toxic and burns that Blastoise doesn't want to deal with. So that's nice. Last one. All right. Gliscor. Gliscor is really good with Blastoise, being the hazard setter, while Blastoise is your hazard remover. Any nasty electric moves or grass moves, Gliscor just kind of eats up, and Blastoise does the same with ice moves that might get thrown your way. Now, the big caveat for this, and this will show up at the enemy step, but Freeze Dry. Freeze Dry absolutely wrecks these guys. That's where you might want to consider Yachi Berry for maybe one or both of them, depending on what the opponent has. But overall, instead of having that same kind of role where they can trade off and do different things, Gliscor and Blastoise do very different things, but both of them work and mesh really well together, considering they patch each other's type weaknesses. Gliscor is more physically defensive, Blastoise is more specially defensive, and they can both pivot into each other and really help wear down an opposing team while keeping your guys fresh. Alright, so those are the allies to draft. I try to include a decent array of like draftable point mons. They're not all just like super high tier. That's why I include like Gligar here. Gligar is probably going to be on the lower end of the spectrum, maybe in the mid tier. It's going to be probably priced around Blastoise. Gliscor is going to be considerably more, whereas Kamala is usually pretty cheap. Breloom's around the middle. Goodra probably middle to high, same with Jirachi. And then Coco and Scizor are going to be your high tier kind of selections. So you got a decent amount of choice. Enemies. So these are who's gonna make Blastoise's life really rough. Rillaboom's the first one. Priority, Grassy Glide, but also it's going to be a little bit faster generally, just due to the nature of the sets Blastoise likes to run. And Woodhammer will send you into the Shadow Realm, plain and simple. Even a Rocky Helmet, Rindo Berry, it's generally not worth it just to keep Blastoise in. If you have to absolutely do it and you're going through mocks and you're like, I don't have a good alternative, yeah, throw in Rindo Berry and pray, while just throwing everything else in defenses. But even then, if you do choose to stay in, you can also catch a knockoff and lose your leftovers, and that's kind of a big deal. Rillaboom is pretty rough. So unless you have Terra that's specifically designed to counter Rillaboom, say you're going with the Iron Defense Body Press set and you're like, I'm going to be just Terra fighting, I'm going to click Iron Defense, and I'm going to just bully my way through Rillaboom, well, Rillaboom can pivot and it can go to something else too. So that's going to be a really hard mon to overcome. I'm not saying you can't bring Blastoise to an opponent that has this Pokemon, but you're going to have other answers and supports on your team. Another one, Zapdos. So, talking about Zapdos now, this is, again, a very popular mon for draft. You might see it in range strategies, you might see it in just balanced team compositions, but odds are you will come across it if you don't draft it yourself 9 times out of 10. Unfortunately for Blastoise, the special attacking sets don't really bully through Zapdos. Physical attacking sets have to fear the static effect of Zapdos if you want to click Flip Turn, or if you accidentally click Body Press or Wave Crash into them. And Zapdos has super effective means to deal with Blastoise, and even if you have a ground type in the back, it can still pivot with U-turn. And it can also Toxic you or Toxic one of your teammates, so it puts you in a very compromising position, unfortunately, due to the nature of it. So, unfortunately, it's going to be one of those that's laid down, but conversely, too, it's going to be one of those mons that if you do draft it with Blastoise, they kind of work well together. So, kind of weird. Moving on, we've got the bundle. Iron Bundle is certainly a mon to draft. It's usually tiered very high. It's not my favorite, but it does have a really, really good niche in it being a very fast ice and water attacker that can get through other water types thanks to Freeze Dry. And Freeze Dry is Blastoise's kind of kryptonite here. Now, even furthermore, +1 Rapid Spin, you still don't outspeed normal bundle. And if the opponent knows the game plan for Shell Smash Blastoise, +2 speed, your Shell Smash speed, Scarf Bundle still outspeeds you, and it can kill you, especially if you don't have Mental Herb for that defensive drop. So you have to be very mindful when you see this thing. Yachi Berry is probably your best option if you want to get in some damage with Blastoise, but you don't have a whole lot of options to threaten back unless you're using a Terra. So keep that in mind if you see a bundle. You're going to need a different answer. If you use the Yachi Berry strategy with Blastoise, it's kind of a one-trick pony, so to speak. So you're probably going to be wanting to hit with, like, Body Press, for example. So take that for what it is. You're going to notice a theme of Blastoise struggling against other water types, which we're going to have another one right here in Ogerpon Wellspring, I believe. I just call it Ogerpon Water. But it's got a Water Absorb mon, so you can't pivot on it. You can't use your stat moves. It has grass coverage against you. Again, you could bring Rindo Berry if you really want to, but odds are you just should not stay in on this thing whatsoever. It can also punish you with Spiky Shield if you have the Body Press variant, and it's faster than you as well. It's just bad news all around, and that furthermore brings us down to some budget options that can make Blastoise's life pretty hellish, which are Mantine and Lantern. These don't always get drafted. They're fairly niche mons, anywhere between, depending on your draft board, gonna probably be between 5 and 3 points, honestly. Mantine might be a little bit higher, Lantern might be a little bit higher depending on the league, but generally they're low tier options. But they both share Water Absorb, which is pretty problematic to deal with considering Blastoise's primary attacking types. And Lantern even has Volt Absorb, so it can take Terra Blast Electric from the Shell Smash variant. Mantine also has Roost and Toxic, so it can just outpace Blastoise and wear you down. Has really good special defense too. Lantern just has a lot of HP. It doesn't really have sterling defenses, but it can threaten you back with its Stab Electric moves, and it can Volt Switch on you, which makes just outpacing either of these mons very, very difficult. And again, you'll probably have a game plan against these since they're not world beaters, but just keep them in mind. If you have them on the opponent's side and you have a Blastoise, probably not going to have a direct answer with your own mon. Now the last one, special mention. The ultimate Blastoise killer is Jellicent. Jellicent is immune to your stab with Water Absorb, has Energy Ball and Strength Sap to deal damage or wear you down, and has recovery. It can use Toxic. It spin blocks, which is important, which most of those other mons above we talked about don't do that. You could still at least get like a Panic Rapid Spin in more times than not. Not the case here, unfortunately. This is a very good mon for just blanking whatever you do. I'm a big believer in Jellicent in draft. I think its typing and its abilities neutralize a lot of other popular picks, with Blastoise being a very popular pick, and it's a very good counter pick that does its role exceedingly well. And now it does have its own problems too, but it's not like Blastoise is going to hit it with knockoff or anything, right? So even Mega Blastoise with Dark Pulse, it can rock a Colbur Berry, it can threaten back, it can spread Toxic. So, and it doesn't have bad defenses either. So again, you're not going to OHKO it with Mega Blastoise if it's EV'd correctly on the specially defensive side. So keep that in mind. It is honestly one of the best answers to Blastoise and Mega Blastoise. If, again, you might be saying it's like, well, I can just keep clicking Dark Pulse, right? Well, it does have this very funny interaction of knowing Imprison, and it learns Dark Pulse itself. So if it outspeeds you and you underspeed your Blastoise, so if we go over here and we type in Jellicent, Jellicent's got 60 base speed, right? Blastoise 78. So if you're going minimum speed, say you use this set over here, you're going min speed, we're going 192, and we look at Jelly, we could probably, if we went with a fast nature, ooh, yeah, you can outspeed it. So it's definitely within the realm of possibility that Jellicent comes in, clicks Imprison, you can't click your Dark Pulse, Aura Sphere doesn't do anything, Water Pulse doesn't do anything, Rapid Spin doesn't do anything, and you're just out of luck. You just can't actually do damage to it, unfortunately. So that's kind of funny, where it doesn't even have to invest specially defensively, which 105 and 100 HP is pretty darn good. We'll have to talk about Jellicent later on. But anyways, that is kind of like the ultimate boogeyman of what keeps Blastoise up at night is going to be Jellicent. Prey. So we have to talk about what's Blastoise actually going to be blasting through that you can expect other teams to draft in your league. First one, Ursaluna and Ursaluna Blood Moon. Blastoise has a pretty decent matchup against these guys. They don't have a super effective move against you outside of like Trailblaze and Thunder Punch, but they don't want to be clicking those moves most of the time, especially Blood Moon. You have decent special defense as well against Blood Moon, so... And neither of these mons, while having decent HP pools, they don't have great special defenses. Now, they can use AV sets against you, but odds are they're not going to game plan for Blastoise specifically. It's going to be your other special attacking threats that may warrant them to bring AV or not, but this is one of the more favorable ones as well. You're going to outspeed them. You can build momentum with Rapid Spin. You can get that off. You can flip turn on them. You can scald them and risk them being burned, but Ursaluna likes being burned. It's more or less for Blood Moon. So yeah, you can do decent damage to them. Another one that is very commonly drafted is going to be Darmanitan. Darmanitan is a very fragile mon, and it hates bulky water types, and a physically defensive invested Blastoise is going to be able to absorb all of the attacks that Darmanitan Galar can throw at you, whether it's Earthquake, Icicle Crash, U-Turn, you name it, you're pretty much fine. And this kind of incentivizes you too to wear Rocky helmets, because more times than not, Darmanitan Galar is going to be using a Scarf, so it can outspeed all the 120, 125 base speed mons. That's kind of its whole shtick. So it needs pretty decent support, but you can punish this guy pretty well by using like Iron Defense sets, or just using Rocky Helmet. Another one, Garganackle. Now this might surprise you, as Garg has a very good move against Blastoise, besides its just towering bulk, which is Salt Cure. And that's why I listed earlier on, one of the key moves for Blastoise, for regular Blastoise, mind you, is Covert Cloak. Covert Cloak negates the damage from Salt Cure that would normally cripple water types. It's really good against certain mons that rely upon a special move to do certain things, so I recommend Covert Cloak against anybody that really likes using Fake Out, uses Assault Cure. Petrarun likes to use Malignant Chain, not having that to worry about necessarily. It can confuse your opponent and force them to stay in an extra turn and be like, well, why didn't that work? More seasoned opponents, though, will recognize it and be like, okay, I can't get through this, I need to think of a new game plan, or bring in my knockoff user. So as long as you have the proper EVs, you can outpace recover with your Blastoise if you use your stab moves. And it can also provide an opportunity to set up if you got the Shell Smash variant. So that's nice. Another one, Donphan. Donphan's very commonly drafted. I think it's a little overrated for most leagues. I see it tiered even above Blastoise a lot of time. I think Rapid Spin and Stealth Rocks on Amon is very good. It has a decent move pool, but it's still quite limited. And Blastoise is a very good anti-lead into Donphan. Donphan's moves aren't going to be very effective against you. You can thwart rocks being put up by rapid spinning against it. You can, if you're specially attack invested, you can use Surf and just kind of make this mon's day really bad once security is broken. So it's really good against this. Another one, kind of like Donphan, would be like Mudsdale. If you're, again, running special attacking, you do not care if they get those stamina boosts, and you can just kind of roll over them. So Blastoise kind of feasts on these would-be lead ground types. So keep that in mind. It is a good anti-lead. And the other one, Skeledirge. If Dirge doesn't have Terra, Torch Song doesn't have enough time to come online, you can Toxic it, reduce the effectiveness of Slack Off, and Mega Blastoise might just outright OHKO it with click Dark Pulse or your Water move. Again, I would more or less click Dark Pulse since you're not getting stab bonus off of it for the eventual pivot if they got something else that's weak to Dark. Otherwise, spam your Water moves, have fun. Skeledirge isn't going to be really so much of a threat to spin block you, and if it does Terra, well, it can't spin block anymore because it's probably not going to be Ghost. A lot of times you'll see Terra Water or Terra Fairy, so that's just something to keep in mind. It's pretty decent against this, unless of course it's going to be Terra Bulk and you're trying to run your Shell Smash variant or some other setup. It's more or less pivot and support Blastoise that's going to be doing okay against this. So yeah. My overall grade on Blastoise is it's a great value pickup, but again, it's not something you're going to build centrically around your draft. It's most times going to be picked up around rounds 4 to 7 of whatever draft you're doing. Again, some drafts go to 8 Pokemon, some go as many as 11 or 12. It's going to be very popular in those mid rounds when people have already picked their top end of the draft that they really want to have be their central focus points, and then they start looking for the glue mons, right? The ones that help connect everything together. And Blastoise tends to be a very popular pick for obvious reasons. You get Hazard Control. Mega Blastoise fits really nice onto terrain-focused teams, and might go a little bit earlier, but you're not going to see Mega Blastoise go probably round 1 or 2 most times, unless somebody just really likes them on, which, depending on the price point, might be value, might be not, but it's going to be dependent if you want that kind of investment for your Mega. There are better Megas out there because Mega Blastoise can't use Shell Smash, but it does still provide a lot of that core flexibility Blastoise does. So it's a great addition. Having a water type is pretty much non-negotiable for most drafts. You don't want to have to rely on Terra to have some other mon be your water mon, so it's a great option that way. And that ties up our final comments on Blastoise and Mega Blastoise, finishing up our trio. Now, we'll be talking about a few other mons later on. We're going to still probably stay in the Kanto region a little bit, but we might jump around to some less heralded mons that have seen usage or are just available for draft. And then we'll be talking about some strategies later on that dictate the ebb and flow of the draft meta specifically. So if you've hung in this long, thank you for listening. This has been Focus Miss Gaming, and hopefully you've gotten something out of this. If you have any cool Blastoise sets that you want to share, put them down in the comments and let people know that, hey, maybe you found success with this or you saw somebody else do this in a really cool replay. All the better for sharing and helping us get a little bit better at draft. All right, that's it. Take care.